week we started now. Yeah, that's it. We started posting the shiurim, so we had the big schus that Yaakov Kaufman's father listened to the shiur, and since he's a mumcha in kashrus, and not only is he a mumcha in kashrus, but his father-in-law is even a bigger mumcha than him, so he sent me some corrections about the things that we spoke about kashrus. So first of all, I had said that the CRC app is an amazing app, so he didn't say it's not an amazing app, but he pointed out that the CRC has a list of reliable hechsherim, and not every hechsher that is not on the list is not automatically not recommended, meaning there are hechsherim that he knows that are reliable that are not on that list. So just I think to point out. Also, he corrected me when I spoke about I said that all spices do not require a hechsher. He said that's taka the CRC's policy. He works for the OU, and he knows that the OU's policy is garlic powder requires a hechsher, because garlic powder is sometimes made in China on treifa kelim, and therefore that could be an issue. Excuse me. He also pointed out another reason why it might be need a hechsher is because if spices come from Eretz Yisrael, then there's a problem of trumas and maaseris, and in that case, even that it needs a hechsher. Now, he pointed out that on most food items it says product of whatever, USA, Chile, whatever it comes from. But when it comes to spices, they usually get them in bulk and they repackage them in America. In that case, they can write product of America. So therefore, it technically needs a hechsher. It's a far concern, but you should just be aware of that. That's another technical problem with spices. So he works for the OU. So there's something which I wanted to point out as well. But a different question was, OU good enough? There's this assumption out there by people that are not familiar with the kashrus world that OU is like the bottom of the list, and then if it has olive base in it, that's the top of the list. OU is a very reliable hechsher. OU, what they do 100%. OU, for certain things, they have lesser standards. What's considered, what requires Bishul Yisrael or Pas Yisrael, whatever, or Cholad Yisrael. But OU is just, in my opinion, if they tell you that this is good, then it's good. If they tell you that this is, doesn't require Pas Yisrael, Bishul Yisrael, whatever. But if OU says that the spice is kosher, then it's kosher. The facts are that all the olive base hechsherim rely on the OU and all the international hechsherim anyway. So it's like a... So that's people that like the olive base. They like olive base. I can tell you that I imagine that the Libra spices rely on the OU and the OK and everything else. Huh? They don't like spices. Huh? Okay. You're finding Rabbi Ben Shimon's joke. He says that. So when a new product comes out onto the market, so different people come and they say, there's a new ketchup. So Rabbi Ben Shimon says, I'm going to know the first thing is, does it taste better or not? And he tells me about certain people that we both know. That person, the first thing is it cheaper, is it not? Other people are going to check right away. They say, is it a better hechsher or not? And you can add today, other people say, is it healthier or not? So everyone has theirs. So I'll dedicate the spices. But another important thing that he told me to speak about, which I didn't want to talk about it last time because this is an endless conversation, but he brought it up, so I'll share also. He actually had a very important question, which he said he doesn't have an answer for. Regarding specifically Lay's potato chips. Now, to clarify how it works, he told me now, really his father-in-law, who's Yaakov Kaufman's grandfather, who was one of the biggest mumchim in kashrus in America, and any question you have, I've asked him many questions in the past. His name is Rabbi Reuven Nathanson, sein gesund und stark. So he told me this numerous times. Lay's has 22 factories, Frito-Lay's in America. How do potato chips, how do you make them? You slice them in thin slices, and they get fried in oil. How does the oil get heated up? Then you would say, who cares? But halachically, there's a difference. If the oil is heated up by a regular fire underneath the oil, that is for sure bishul. And if indeed we say that potatoes require bishul yisrael, then then they're not bishul yisrael, and then you shouldn't be eating them according to those that claim they need bishul. However, Lay's, the way they heat up their oil is they have a boiler which has fire, but there's water which produces steam. The steam then goes through pipes. The pipes are in the vat with the oil, and the heat of the pipe basically transfers to the oil. And then that oil ends up cooking the potato chips. In this case, it's not regular types of bishul. Now, when we spoke last time, we didn't talk about this, but Chachamim said that food that was cooked by a goy is asur. They specifically said if it was cooked by a goy, bishul. But if it's steamed by a goy, smoked by a goy, produced in other ways, even though there's heat involved, if it's not considered cooking, it doesn't require bishul yisrael. So therefore, Rabbi Nathanson, who years ago started working in kashrus, he spoke to Rabbi Levitansky Olav Shalom. Rabbi Levitansky was a shliach in the city of Simcha Monica, as he liked to call it. He was a very big rav, a big Talmud Chacham. And when he heard how they made Lay's potato chips, he said, Lay's potato chips, for sure, even though you're makbid on potatoes being Bishul Yisrael, no problem, you can have Lay's potato chips. That's what Rabbi Levitansky said. I did find other Rabbanim that's claim no. Other Rabbanim says, who cares how the oil is heated up? It's considered bishul and requires. So what Rabbi Kaufman was trying to tell me is that even if you're makbid on bishul Yisrael potato chips, there is room to be lenient. Now, what he actually told me is that it's not just Lay's. He's been in many factories that produce potato chips, and many of them also use the thermal heat. He says usually if it says kettle cooked, that means it's directly on the fire, on the oil's on the fire. But if it doesn't say kettle cooked, it's very shaykh that it's not cooked with the oil wasn't cooked by fire. So in that case, it's more of a room. According to Rabbi Levitansky, with a very Siddush Yid, he claims there's no need to make it Bishul Yisrael in such a case. So that's what. And then he added a heavy question. He said, as was mentioned, all these Bishul Yisrael potato chips, Libras and the like. How do they make it Bishul Yisrael? They obviously someone sent to the factory to turn on the fire. However, Rabbi Kaufman pointed out to me, as I mentioned last week, if indeed it's not considered Bishul Yisrael, if it's considered Bishul Akum, and the Kalim are not kosher. If the Kalim are not kosher, so when Liebers will send their Hamashgiach, because just to clarify, Liebers does not have any companies which make potato chips. All these companies are doing private labeling. Private labeling means you go to a company which makes potato chips, and then you do your thing and you make your own label that for Liebers or Pashkas, whatever it may be. So they're not using their own company. So they're going to companies which already make potato chips, and they're turning on the fire. But if the kalim if the potato chips require bishul Yisrael, that means that these kalim are bishul akum. You have to kasher these kalim. And tells me Rabbi Kaufman, it's very hard to believe that anyone's kashering these kalim because he knows how these things work, and it's very complicated to kasher a fryer, to remove it's oily, greasy, to remove everything and put it back in and to kasher it. So probably what they're doing is that they're relying on the fact that, you know something, it could be potato chips, could be bishul, don't need bishul anyway. And we're going to light the fire also. But it's really, you're taking the like you're making Bishul Yisrael, but the Kelim are not Bishul Yisrael anyway. So that was his. They said he asked many people, he hasn't gotten an answer. But probably the answer is that the Aleph base wants to make some more money, so they do it like that. Yeah. He said kettle. That's what he told me. Kettle cooked means that there's a fire and that's directly under the oil, and that's for sure considered bishul. Meaning, if you want to be makbid that your potato chip should be bishul Yisrael, then that for sure is an issue because that's not bishul Yisrael. But if it's with the thermal heat from outside, in that case, even if you require bishul Yisrael, this might not need bishul Yisrael. Yeah. All the kosher, if you walk into a store, you'll have Liebers. Liebers doesn't own a single factory in the world. God, they don't own anything. All these companies, and not just that, Walmart also. Walmart maybe owns companies, but Pashtus, Walmart doesn't own anything either. There's a lot of companies that produce, that's why also you'll see a lot of times in supermarkets, you're going to see the same product, the same style bottle, but a whole bunch of different companies on it. Because they're all made in the same place. Just he puts on it best value, great value, which is both Walmart, whatever, and they put another thing on it, and it's all the same thing. There's the bagels that are Pas Yisrael in Walmart. You have Thomas Bagels, Sara Lee, and there's another two other companies. They're all made in the exact same factory, and they're the exact same thing, and they're different the price. This is $250, this is $350, because it has a better name. It's exact same thing. It's called private labeling. So does most of these things. And the chosh of the companies like Coca-Cola, Lay's, they're not going to let anyone private label them because it's our product. They're not going to do it. But a lot of companies, the chatchila will make a potato chips, a soda, whatever it is. Everyone comes and puts their labels on, pashkas, whatever they want. So they want when I come and I say, that's it, you make potato chips, let's say, yeah? So anyone comes and puts their stamp on it. So when I make it, I can come and I can cash your thing and make it kosher or Pesach. If they require kasher, no kasher, yes. If it's kosher or Pesach, they'll kosher or Pesach, yeah. We hope so. Yeah. Wait. It doesn't say Pas Yisrael on the bagels. The bagels that have the code 33803, you remember? Market side. No, That's something else. They have Pas Yisrael, if I'm not mistaken. They say on it. I'd say that there's OU has a website, and Shalom Goldson's father, who's also a big guy in the OU, not as big as Nathanson, no one as big as Nathanson, but he also has a big mumche. He has a blog for Pas Yisrael products that are not, or doesn't say on it, and he shares from time to time different things that people don't know that are Pas Yisrael. So he's the one that shares that. There's also Heidi Bagels, that's UMK. Huh? That's UMK, because UMK only makes Pas Yisrael. As far as I know, yeah, that's what I was told. Okay. All right, there have a lot of questions. I'm not going to have time to go through everything. We'll see what we can do. Why did the Rebbe switch our way of dressing? Don't Yidden always keep the way of dressing? And why did he tell certain people to keep it? So this that Yidden have is a unique mode of dress and we can't change it is not really so accurate because in the past everybody wore robes 1,000 years ago, and slowly things have changed and Yidden have changed with them. When it says that a Jew has a distinctive type of dress and doesn't dress like a goy, it means that there are certain non-sneeristic types of clothing which catch the eye, which are provocative, which stick out. Those are the kind of clothing which Yidden are not allowed to wear. But we all wear pants and goyim wear pants. We all wear shirts and goyim wear shirts. That itself is not an issue. You might argue that wearing a hoodie over your head like this, that may be considered like a goyish style, but even that, I wouldn't say that. So B'meila and the Rebbe and Klal Yisrael all go with the times. All the clothing that are considered normal and respectable are considered permissible as well. Now, the Rebbe's clothing, the only change the Rebbe did is that the Rebbe didn't wear a shreimer like other Rebbeim, and that's more of an element of bittul. Maybe there's a story behind it also, maybe, but the pashtus, it's not like he changed much. Yeah. So there's another thing about, so the Bacher is asking about why certain Hasidim, the Rebbe said that not change the levush. I assume we're talking about Berkechem or a Mendel Futifas, I forget one of them, maybe both of them, that after he came out of Russia, so in Russia they all wore a casquette. He came to 770, everybody's wearing shlappers. That's what these hats are called. So he also bought a shlapper. That's what the Yaakov's name is from, because his family used to make hats. Where is he? On the room. Oh, here he is. Right? He himself told me that. The shlapper is a word, and I always know the shlapper. That's what it means. It means hat. You can call him Hat Bersky. It's a lot simpler than calling him shlapper, right? Come on, Yaakov. It's okay. So either way, so this chassid bought a hat, a regular shlapper, and the Rebbe saw by the farbrengen. The Rebbe told him, "Where's your casquette?" They wanted with the casquette. So I assume the Bacher is asking why. Why? Pashtus, because the Rebbe felt. My interpretation, which the Rebbe doesn't explain himself. My interpretation would be that there's a certain inspiration that you can have from a chassid with a casquette more than with a shlapper. And Berkechem actually has a hero from the Rebbe. His grandson told me the story that the Rebbe told him that Yisrael for a certain kufa to take a taxi, travel to a certain location, get in a taxi, walk a few blocks or something, get back into the taxi and go home. That was a hero. Apparently, there was the Rebbe wanted someone to see a real chassid, and the Rebbe told him to go to that place. So without asking, of course, he listened. So there's such an Indian with the casquette. There's a certain look that maybe the Rebbe wanted to inspire. That's my interpretation, but we don't know what the Rebbe's cheshbonus are. 1 second. Short jackets in Russia also some had. Some didn't have. It was considered a modern trend, but it wasn't. The Rebbe didn't make it a thing that you can't wear a long jacket. It was. Again, it wasn't in Russia. It might have been considered, more modern or short jackets versus long jackets, but it became normal. Again, it wasn't. The things are not the etzim a problem. Yeah. That also could be maybe because everyone wants them to continue inspiring the Predisher community. A Predisher that comes that changes his levush by the Predisher, he's not one of them anymore. You're not going to be listening to him. No. Size is not a problem. It's a bakavah thing. It's not. I don't think that's a change in the levush. That's a bakavah thing. I think it's the same general answer. Yes. Whole question. So you modernize yourself? We're for sure modernized. There's no question that our clothing today is more modern than the past. In the past they wore robes. Everything over time. That's a question of Kabbalah. Something else. There's a discussion in halacha. Well. There's discussions in halacha how to do this kind of things. Discussions in halacha. That's a whole different conversation. It pays a specific whole subject for itself. The general answer to the levushim is that we're allowed to wear dress like the goyim if it's not something which is it's not sneers or provocative or something like that. You might have to make Libra's pants also now. I don't think he changed. He wore the same kind of levush. The main change of the rebbe is that he didn't wear a shlar. That's the only big change. It's normal to wear. This is the regular Shabbos clothes. Well, we're not taking new questions now. Okay. Yeah. Okay, this is because we want to be penguins. No, that's question. What was before the world and what did it look like? There's a Gemara in Chagiga. The Gemara says that somebody that asks the following questions: what's above, what's below, what did the world used to look like, and what's going to be in the future? And anyone else that doesn't respect Hashem, it's better he shouldn't have been born. But the Gemara says you better be careful about asking such questions. The Gemara then asks, and after Zayin Amadav, the Gemara asks, maybe you want to know what was above, what's below, and what's after. No, it's okay. You're messing with Hashem. You're challenging. It's not appropriate. But who cares about what happened in the past? What's the big deal to ask what the world used to look like before it was created? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yechon, Rabbi Elazar Mitravayu, Moshel HaMelech Basar V'Dam, Sha'amar La'avodav B'nuli Palterin Guleilin Al Ha'ashpa. He told his servants, go build me a fancy mansion on top of a dump. They went and they built a beautiful mansion. The king doesn't want people to remember there used to be a dump over here. He wants them to look at his mansion and enjoy it. So the English said before the world was created, there was a dump. That's a simple type of the Gemara. So the Maram Prague explains that when people start thinking about the Toyu Vavayu before, they're going to have this misinterpretation of what things were, and they get all confused, and therefore you cannot ask these questions. I remember in second grade, my teacher. I upset at him. Is that I asked him when we were learning Parshas Bereishis about how Hashem created the world, there was nothing before. I was like, wow, nothing before. So somebody would have been there, we just fall forever. I said, no one could have been there. I said, but yet if someone would have been there, who could fall? He kept saying, no one was there. But if, and I was so upset, he didn't want to answer my question. But what would happen if? So my second grade teacher. Huh? I was in second grade. I remember the question. He didn't answer me. Okay. Does chocolate milk come from brown cows? That question was asked by someone from Russia, probably. No? Because he knows that it actually comes from brown cows. He wouldn't ask the question. Can I use maaser money for donating for the farbrengen? I think so. I think donating money, I think that the Bochum are always hungry and Bochum are poor. And when you give money to farbrengen, you're feeding poor people. And therefore, I think it's permitted, besides the fact that it's an element of Kedusha, because the farbrengen is a very holy place. It's a very holy institution. Farbrengens can accomplish much in Avedas Hashem and Torah mitzvahs. So I feel that definitely you can give donations to farbrengens. Yes. Maaser. You could give, definitely. You can give money to a poor Bochum. No, you cannot give l'chaim to anybody, especially not to Ukrainians. You can give maaser, but I said the story numerous times. There was a farbrengen, and they were collecting money for mashke. And there was a bacher just about like you. It was actually in Russia, the story. And he also gave money for the farbrengen, for the mashke. And they went to buy the mashke. And when they came back, he asked for l'chaim. So they said, no, you're too young for having l'chaim. So he said, but I gave money for it. So you think this is a bar? You pay and you get mashke? No. You do participate in the farbrengen, and that's it. You don't have to have mashke. What? You can give. What kind of funny question is that? Can you give maaser to a poor person? Yes. If he happens to be a bacher, you can't give it to him anymore. What kind of weird question is that? I was considered poor. Whoa, that's a good question. What's considered poor? What? That's why the Bochum are not supposed to be drinking mashke. Yes. No. LED lights, no. Farbrengens, yeah. Okay, no, if you're going to talk the whole time, you want me to go through any questions? Yeah. Okay, you can't stop me like that in public. You have to ask me questions over there, then I can look it up and make it as if I know what I'm talking about. Okay. Was it easier to be mekushar before Gimel Tammuz than after? Now, I wasn't a bacher before Gimel Tammuz. I was a child before Gimel Tammuz. So I can tell you that people lived in Crown Heights. They had their own lives, and they weren't big chassidim. But the word of mekushar, it's hard to. The word of mekushar. The word of mekushar is a very broad word. Mekushar means connected. And a connection is many different levels. There's an external connection and an internal connection. I remember I was in 770 as a bacher. It's after Gimel Tammuz, like I said. And my mashpia, who was my teacher in yeshiva, so he came for Tishrei, and we were sitting over there. It was a Shabbos morning, Yom Tov morning, I forget what it was. And we were only chassidus, and he told me, when I was a bacher, before Gimel Tammuz, 770 was never so full on a Shabbos morning. Balabatim came, rolled in for shul. The Bachrim, they woke up late always. There weren't so many Chassidish Bachrim the way they are today. So, in a certain sense, I would think that before Gimel Tammuz, because people saw the Rebbe Kipshutai, and they received orders from the Rebbe, so therefore, I think the basis for his kashrus was easier. But the avodah part, I don't think was easier then. Because I know that my uncle told me about Rama York, who was farbrengen with Bachram in 7-7, and he told, you guys don't know what it means, B'chlal. When we were Bachram, he says, we weren't by the Rebbe. So we had machshav azardus. But you guys, you're in 770. You obviously see the Rebbe. You obviously have no machshav azardus. My uncle said the Bachram were laughing. See, crazy? We don't have machshav azardus. So what from 7 see the Rebbe every day? We still have machshav azardus. Which means to say that the basis for his kashrus was easier, because the simple love for the Rebbe was easier. But the actual avodah part, it still required you to sit and learn and wake up and do the Rebbe's and Yonim. That I don't think was easier then. Yeah. Of course they took it for granted. Of course you take it for granted. But that wasn't the question. I don't think so.
I mean, people wouldn't take it for granted.
Levi Mizrahi, come here. Come here. Come here. Huh?
It's back and forth with the comments, Rabbi. It's like it feels like the dogs are going forever. It's like, yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay. What is some history on this yeshiva? I'm not reading it out loud. Should I read it out loud? Yes. Question is, we just got the answer. How do you get Levi Mizrahi to be quiet? We just did it. It's quiet. Okay, the question that was asked a moment ago, was some history about this yeshiva. The history of this yeshiva is like this. Apparently, the Rabashkins were looking to expand their business company, their fleish, the way it used to be, just like I spoke before about private labeling, for meat as well. For meat as well, the way the industry worked in the Jewish world until the 1980s, maybe 90s, as far as I understand, in America, there was no kosher schlachters. What happened was there was many factories that produced chickens and meat and cows and all that. Shachtim would go, but people would come to the company and they would ask, you're producing chickens anyway, can I shacht my chickens over here? Take all the kosher ones. Can I shacht my cows here? Take all the kosher ones. The company would charge a fee, and this way, that's how meat and chicken was produced. And the Rabashkin family, who were the ones that always dealt with meat and chicken, so they had an idea to open up a whole new company dedicated only to kosher. And this way, they won't have to pay all these rental fees and whatever they're paying. And they asked the Rebbe for a bracha. And the way I heard the story, which hasn't been verified, I asked the Rabashkins so much of times, it's hard to get a clear answer. No one knows, or they don't want to say. I don't know what it is that apparently they gave the Rebbe three options. They looked into three factories that were for sale, and Postville is one of them, and the Rebbe officially chose Postville. Now, Heshi Rabashkin, Yisrael Rabashkin's father, I asked him the story. He said, I don't know the story, but I know my father. My father wouldn't do anything without asking the Rebbe. So if he bought this place, it must be the Rebbe gave him a bracha, askam or something. Now, they came here, and when they came here, l'chatchila, this was middle of nowhere, Kipshutai, as it still is, and as a result, it wasn't shaykh to live here full time. So the closest normal community is in Minnesota. So the Rabashkins moved to Minneapolis, and it was a 3-hour drive. They would leave here they would Shabbos, Sunday morning, they would come to Postville, and the shachtim would check, they would work, and then for Friday, before Shabbos, they would drive back. And eventually this was uncomfortable because the children grew up without, the father was away the whole week, and it's back and forth. So eventually Yisrael Rabashkin's father was the first person that actually moved with his wife to Postville. They had a house in town, and they were mamish the only religious couple in town. It wasn't like a shluchim that go to other places, they're the only religious person in town. The only Jews in town, all the Jews are b'chlal. And they were there alone. Slowly, the shul building, which is now still the shul building, they bought that building. Slowly, more people started to move in and buy houses, and eventually there was somewhat of a community, and then there was time to create a cheder. So the Rabashkins brought down some malamdim from different places, and there was 2-3 classes, combined classes, and slowly, a few years later, if I'm not mistaken, Tafshin and Zayin, 1997, that was the year that there was finally the 8th grade finished. Now what? 8th grade is finished, now we have to have a yeshiva. So sending away, no one wants to send away, so let's open up a yeshiva. One of the shachtim at the time was a shikol Talmud Chacham. They asked him, how about part-time this, part-time that, you'll do a yeshiva, and then it'll, that'll be you'll take care of these kids. So he did it for 1 year. It was what it was. After that, they decided they're going to get someone else to do the job, someone that's more experienced running a big yeshiva. And they got a yid by the name of Rabbi Stern. Rabbi Stern has a long track record of running many yeshivas. He was in many places before and after. He came down to Postville. He had been in Montreal before. He brought with him some teachers from Montreal, and he brought a whole new chayes, and there was a lot of advertisement, and Postville boomed. And there was like 60, 70 kids the next year. He was, for 2 or 3 years, he was running the place, and he brought people down, and one of the people that he brought down, a lot of Elter Brachim, was Rabbi Elio ben Shimon. He brought him down to help out with as Elter Bracher to teach. Rabbi Elio ben Shimon was teaching, and then after he taught, the next year, Rabbi Elio ben Shimon got married, and in the summertime, Chayel, and then he was hired to teach in 8th grade the next year. But in that summer, Rabbi Stern didn't work out, and he's leaving. So he left, and other people left with him, and the yeshiva went from 60, 70 bachrim down to like 15 or 20 bachrim, from a jump like that. And at that time, one of the teachers that had come became like the menal in charge. And Rabbi Eli ben Shimon was a teacher of 8th grade, but then everything was in the same building, in the shul building, the cheder and the yeshiva. And the Bachrim that were in the yeshiva remembered Rabbi Eli ben Shimon from last year as Alter Bacher Shliach. Now he's an 8th grade teacher, but he's still in the building. And they weren't so happy with the way the yeshiva was running in the following year, so they asked him if he can step in and help out. So he agreed to step in, and he started helping out in the yeshiva. And then the Bachrim were complaining, of course, like always. Their complaint at that time was that there were no shluchim. Not like now they have very good shluchim, Baruch Hashem. Shout out to Meir. Appreciate what you have. And of David, appreciate what you have. And the other of David that came now. And you can also add Yisrael to the mix as well. And Shalom David. But they had 0 shluchim at all, and they wanted shluchim. So what happened was, who? Levi also, and you guys have a lot of good people. If, by the way, one of the jokes that I didn't read that I threw out already is, it was not a joke, it's a serious thing, is a request to raise Mendy Bam's salary. So, Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to work on that. We're going to see what we can do. So, at the time, so there were no shluchim, and the Bachrim really wanted shluchim. Now, at the same time, that year was Tavshin Samach Beis. Well, at that time, there were 15 Bachrim in the yeshiva. 15 Bachrim in the yeshiva, and one of the Bachrim was Mendel Kaufman's father. And at that time, there was Tavshin Samach Beis, and there were 770 Bachrim at the time were trying to arrange a big global mitzvah. And they needed money, so they were flying around to talk to different Gvidim to ask them for money. And they flew down to Postville, and they asked Rabbi Rabashkin if they can participate and donate a large amount of money toward the big mitzvah that they were doing. So about something like learning stuff. The prize is, it's like the global mitzvahs kind of thing. And Rabashkin said, I'll help out on condition you get me shluchim. So they came back to 770, and one of the people in charge was a friend of mine. And it was right after Yud and something happened in 770 at the time, which made me very unhappy. A big fight, which Mamish didn't like seeing fighting. What? And then, so they came to me and they told me the situation. They said, just go from after Yud until Pesach, just to show that we're doing something. And 2 other friends of mine came together. We came there until Pesach. And we were shluchim over here. At the time, everything was in the yeshiva building, and there were a couple of buildings and houses in town that were dorms. And I was a shliach. And after what? Rabashkin. What does it mean to own a school? So when you ask a question, maybe think what you ask first. What do you mean by your question? What do you mean who owned the school? Who ran the school? Rav Ashter was the one that funded the school. That answers your question? Okay. After Pesach, the Bochum asked me and the other shluchim to come back. It's relative to 2 months only, the end of the year. We came back the year after. And then the year after that, already Rabbi Ben Shimon already became the official principal. And I came back again as a second year as a shliach. And then Rabbi Ben Shimon slowly took over more and more. And he was the mashgiach and the manal and taking care of everything. And that went on for another, about 5 years until the raid. When the raid happened, everything basically fell apart. There was other staff that came and went, different things. After the raid, it got very, very tough financially because there was no money because at that time, Rav Ashken almost didn't charge tuition, so people just came for free. And there was basically, he just paid out of pocket all the salaries. And once the raid happened, there was no money, so then we had to start collecting tuition. Rabbi Meshachman then suddenly had to become the Menal Gashmi as well, the financial administrator. And I got into help a little bit also. There were some parents at the time that helped very much, and slowly they helped us out with the Gashmias, but still it was bumpy. It's been bumpy ever since, I can say. But basically that's how. And then slowly over the years, I mentioned I took over more staff came and went. Eventually, we decided we're going to open up a zal, and we opened up a zal, and right away we realized we need more staff for the zal, and that's when we asked Rabbi Zirkin to come down and help with the zal and with the yeshiva. And Baruch Hashem, he's been doing an amazing job with Ashgach and everything like that. And that continues till this very day. That is, I think, a fair recap of the history of Postville.
What was the question?
That was the history of the yeshiva.
What was the question?
I don't know what you're asking.
No.
I don't know what you want. Okay, it's already 7:30, so I guess we'll have to continue next time. What? What's the history of the